Business Review, a daily program that delves into the latest and most significant economic stories. From stock markets to currency news, Business Review covers the most up-to-date stories in the global financial world.
The International Monetary Fund Managing Director, Kristalina Georgieva, urged policymakers on July the 8th to use their response to the pandemic to tackle climate change. She told an International Labour Organization's virtual conference that policies should lay the foundation for a low-carbon, resilient recovery that would create millions of jobs while help address the climate crisis.
And looking ahead, policy should lay the foundation for a low-carbon, resilient recovery that would create the millions of jobs while help address the climate crisis. As reopening begins, we must choose what kind of recovery we want.
She added that officials are especially concerned that the crisis will jeopardize the important development gains of the last years.
We are especially concerned that the crisis will jeopardize the important development gains of the last years. We know that major epidemics often exacerbate inequality, and this crisis will likely have a disproportionate impact on women and young people, as well as workers in low-skilled jobs and those in the informal sector.
The IMF last month forecasted deeper global recession than initially anticipated and now anticipates a global GDP contraction of 4.9% this year and a total output loss of $12 trillion through the end of 2021.
At the IMF, we have just published our latest economic forecast, and we are predicting that the world economy will contract by about 5% this year. Nearly 95% of countries will likely be worse off in 2020 with lower per capita income than last year.
Global leaders called for a comprehensive approach to counter the impact of the coronavirus pandemic, which International Labour Organization chief Guy Ryder said had plunged the world of work into unprecedented crisis. United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres told an ILO summit that was addressed by dozens of heads of state and government via recorded messages that it's not a choice between health or jobs and the economy. They are interlinked, noting that members will either win on all fronts or fail on all fronts. World Health Organization head Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus told the summit the world had a special duty to protect the millions of healthcare workers at the front line of the crisis and suffering increasing cases of infection and death. The ILO said last week that the outlook for the global labor market in the second half of 2020 is highly uncertain, and the forecast recovery will not be enough for employment to return to pre-pandemic levels this year. The UN agency said the fall in global working hours was significantly worse than previously estimated in the first half of the year.
Haute couture designers felt that the weight of the virus but it did not stop them from creating. The lockdown was a big period of anxiety for French couturier Stéphanie Rolland, who learned that on government aid to make sure none of his employees would get fired. He said this was an anxiety that he felt day and night, adding he tried getting on a vacation mindset, but he could not stop thinking about the global health emergency. Rolland, like his peers, unveiled his collection at Paris's Haute Couture Showcase this week, an online-only format, while fashion shows are temporarily suspended. Couture labels, which sell a small number of outfits to the uber-rich, are unsure when their clients will be able to travel again or what demand will be as the pandemic rattles economies the world over. Dior creative director Marisa Chiuri was in Rome when the COVID crisis spread in Italy. She gathered a small team to work with the Italian director Matteo Garrone on the Dior film, relying on her daughter for office tasks. Julien Fourny, a French couturier who spent lockdown largely centered on his Paris atelier, said that he is even relieved to have a moment to create a collection without distractions. Confronted with problems in fabric deliveries and embroidery supplier closures during the pandemic, fashion designer Alexis Mabi had to improvise to salvage his next collection, turning to materials he had at hand. Haute Couture Week features one-of-a-kind outfits stitched by hand, presented by a select club of designers. Even for the biggest brands with huge names, that means Europe-wide lockdowns proved a challenge.
Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte said European Union member states were running out of time to counter new forecasts that the Eurozone economy will drop deeper into recession this year due to the COVID-19 pandemic, saying that countries needed the courage to act now. The European Commission forecast on July 7th that the Eurozone would rebound less stably in 2021 than previously thought, with France, Italy and Spain struggling the most. The EU executive said that 19 nations' single currency area would contract by a record 8.7% this year before growing by 6.1% in 2021. In early May, the Commission had forecast a 2020 downturn of 7.7% and a 2021 rebound of 6.3%. Speaking after meeting his Portuguese counterpart Antonio Costa in Lisbon, Conte said the coronavirus pandemic was an unprecedented crisis that threatened to become an economic and social crisis if the member states failed to support each other. On July 17th, EU leaders will meet to discuss a coordinated approach to fighting the pandemic. Costa told reporters that talks between Portuguese and British authorities are underway ahead of the UK's re-evaluation of its decision to keep Portugal off its list for coronavirus restrictions-free travel. Portugal was left off a list of more than 50 countries that Britain considers safe enough for travel without coronavirus-related restrictions, meaning holidaymakers returning from Portugal would have to quarantine for 14 days. British Transport Minister Grant Shapps said the decision will be reviewed by July 27th. The exclusion will be a major deterrent for British tourists, who accounted for 2.1 million of Portugal's foreign visitors last year, and is said to hurt the country's tourism-dependent economy, especially the southern Algarve region. Over a dozen countries have imposed restrictions on travel from Portugal as a dodgily high toll of several hundred new cases per day, concentrated on the outskirts of Lisbon in the past month, has worried authorities.
Iraq partially reopened its southern Shalamcheh border crossing with Iran on July the 7th after more than 3 months of closure due to the pandemic. Border officials said the crossing was being opened only for the trade of foodstuffs, allowing in some 500 trucks from Iran per week, and would open every Wednesday and Sunday from now on. Iraq closed all international borders and provincial boundaries in March, except for the delivery of essential goods such as food, as it sought to curb the spread of the pandemic. Iran, which shares a long border with Iraq, has been the epicenter of the virus in the Middle East, but the spread has also accelerated in Iraq, which has registered nearly 2,000 new cases every day. More than 2,500 people have died from the disease in Iraq. Iran is one of Iraq's biggest trading partners, and both countries' economies are in crisis. Iran continues to suffer from U.S. sanctions, and Iraq is reeling from low prices of oil, which accounts for almost all its state's revenue.
This has been Business Review, your daily source for the most critical stories in the financial world. Tune in next time for the latest financial news impacting the world economy.